Okay, I'm going to try to get CacheCade Pro 2.0 working today. Let's start with the version of MegaRAID Storage Manager. I'm on 12.08. And let's see what's current on the website. If we look at LSI's support website, 12.08 is still current. All right, next, we've got the MegaRAID storage user interface logged in. I've used my own technique of running this in a virtual machine to get it going. And this virtual machine does not live on the RAID array that I'm dealing with here, that I'm trying to turn CacheCade on. Now I replaced my LSI 00290 hardware key. It's the licensing for CacheCade Pro 2.0 and FastPath that comes in a hardware key. I replaced that. When it was pulled away, I couldn't even import my drive array as foreign. So for about a week there, I did without access to my data. That's okay. All the data came right back. I shoved the key in. There was nothing to do. The web BIOS, when you first turn on the power on the machine, didn't ask me anything. It just saw my drives. My RAID 5 was right back again. Okay, now it looks like a drive operation is saying none are in process right here. And it looks like the Create CacheCade SSD caching wizard is available. But before we do that, let's look. There we have an unconfigured SSD, a Samsung 830. So let's just follow along with the wizard and see how this goes. Okay. You cannot ungray those buttons until you pick a RAID level, even for one drive. Create drive group. Now the next button shows up. Both read and write I/O. Excellent. And we can give that a name. We'll just leave it at 1. That's fine. Success. So on the physical side, the drive will no longer be hanging out alone. There you go. It's part of the RAID array. And on the logical side of things, we should see CacheCade virtual drive. Excellent. Set virtual drive properties for read and write. Awesome. So no changes needed because it's already working. If we look up here at the original drive group, you'll see CacheCade type, read and write shown clearly right there with battery backup present. So this went very well. I am finally able to enable read-write caching on my RAID array with a Samsung 830, which is not officially on the supported list, but it's very similar to the enterprise Samsung drive. Okay. I think that's it for this video. Just trying to keep it simple. Basically, how do you enable CacheCade Pro 2.0? And I should point out there was a bit of prerequisite work here. We need to have a recent firmware from 2012. I think it was second quarter onward. Those firmwares were compatible with CacheCade Pro, and you also need the hardware key. So you put all that together, and I've got a RAID adapter that's on the latest firmware right there. Show you the package here. And nothing has come out since. 23.9. 23.9. 0018. So that's the latest firmware bundle. I want to have a quick look at performance and configuration of my CacheCade Pro 2.0 configuration here. So going back to the logical and looking at the virtual drive properties right here, got a bunch of stuff to do, right? Potentially. Well, how do we know what we want to work on? bring up the help system. It's actually not bad. So help contents. Internet Explorer will do. Actually, I think Chrome won't for this particular task. Let's search for CacheCade. And there it is, optimum controller settings. June 2012, so reasonably new. Move that off to the right. Move the actual user interface to the left, side by side, and now bring up virtual drive properties. All right, so now it should be straightforward to set them optimally. Write policy, write back with battery backup unit. Great. Read policy, no read ahead, also done. Name says recommended, so this is picked, I guess. I'm not really remembering if I had said it. Cached I/O and stripe size, we don't get a choice. It also does not bother to mention about disk cache policy. I've done some testing of this in the past. Not remembering the results off the top of my head, but it looks like I'm optimal with a couple of extra settings I don't know about. So I'm going to leave that alone and just show you that that's how you do it. Notice it does say stripe size 64 KB, and that's what this says. So yeah, that's it for tuning or settings of CacheCade Pro 2.0. Let's move over to a quick benchmark, just to really get a baseline or some idea if I'm in the right ballpark of the expected speed that I want. So Windows 8 in a virtual machine running ATTO disk bench should work nicely. And before we begin, if you look at the summary tab, you'll see this thing is thick provisioned on the RAID array that has CacheCade Pro 2.0 on it. Right? That means when you look at its file system, it's full size. That's huge. Okay, so we've provisioned 750 gig and we're using that much on the disk. That way we don't have any overhead of, say, thin provisioning that could possibly get in the way. What does this mean? Well, that means if you look at the operating system, it sees a giant C drive, 750 gig. Okay, ready to benchmark, but we want to pump that length up past the 1 gig of cache memory on my LSI 9265 8i RAID controller. And then we want to just run the benchmark and let it rip. Actually, I'm going to run that benchmark tool twice. I'll point out that there's very little other workload of any sort going on. I've quiesced anything but my most important VMs. And if we look at performance, we're well under 10%, more like 5% for disk, CPU, the stuff that matters. So yeah, things are quiet. And there's the RAID array settings, as you saw earlier. So, ready to start the benchmark, making sure that we have the settings correct. We'll run it twice to see if we get consistent results. And let the benchmarking begin. I've seen the user interface say not responding. That can happen fairly often as it's setting up the test, especially when you set it to total length of 2 gig files. You'll see it very quickly recovered and began doing its thing. Now if we look at performance, looks like the performance screen is having a little issue there. Let's try that again. Disk is cranked up. In fact, we're seeing it above 2,000 already. 200,000, excuse me. So these numbers are quite almost SSD-like. So not bad. This is a RAID 5 of rather low-end hard drives, really. And we're doing okay for benchmark speed. So it appears I might be in good shape. So we'll let the benchmark finish. We'll run it a second time and see if we get a very similar look and shape to the performance profile there. This is not the best benchmark necessarily. There's many ways of doing this, but well, let's cruise along. Let me just show you this table. All right, so what you're looking at is a test of this internal RAID array that I settled on. I ended up going with 5 1.5 terabyte drives. This column right here, column B. Individually, ATTO disk bench on a single drive would give you these sort of numbers. It looks like I ran some sort of average. And then you can see the watt burn and so forth. So they're not terribly efficient, not terribly new Seagate 7200.11 drives. I believe I tried to turn off any timeout settings and keep them from dropping from the RAID array, and they've actually performed quite well for a year now. Okay, so the first run is done. Time for the second run. See if we get similar results. I am not claiming this is a perfect benchmark by any stretch. When VMware is running, that's hard to do, but unless you have something really abusing the CPU or disk in the background, it's not that hard. I find the results are consistent, if not very scientific. For my needs, I really just want to get a feel for if it seems I have things configured properly and if I'm getting performance in the ballpark of what I'd expect. And indeed, it looks like the performance is quite respectable. In the past, when fiddling with the various settings on here, I tried a lot of different settings with earlier firmware and a lot of combinations of these attributes here. And the results would vary widely, or they'd be very inconsistent and jumpy, bouncing up and down as you looked across the size of the reads and writes sets here. So far so good. Probably go ahead and speed up this section of video now until the results are in. Okay, so it just barely passed 500 on this one run, and that made it rescale everything. But yeah, it looks good. The numbers are very similar. The shape is similar. So that's really what I wanted to get a sense of, was if things are looking right. Indeed they are. And I like looking at performance right after doing that. We can look at performance of just that VM. There you can see the spikes and the two runs there. Very clear. We can also take a look at performance of ESXi, the Core i7 machine itself, which had no other work to do, so it's going to look very similar as far as the shape of these peaks here and the raw numbers. Okay. Good idea of a disk request here too. Hopefully you found this helpful, and thank you for watching. As always, your feedback is greatly appreciated.